Should you be using a metronome when you play your drums live on stage? Good question, and that's exactly what we're going to tackle here today at Drums on Stage. What's up guys, Dominic here from Drums on Stage. Now, I've heard this question a few times. In fact, I've been discussing this with a viewer named Brian. Goedenavond Brian, wie geht's? There's many pros, there's many cons, and that's what we're going to tackle here today. So initially, when you think about playing on stage, you think about keeping time and everybody being in time. You think, cool, I'll use a metronome. This will be a really good idea because I'll be able to hear it and I'll stay perfectly in time. And that means the whole band, we're all going to be perfectly in time and it's just going to sound amazing. So it sounds like a good idea. But there's a few different reasons why it's not. There's a few pros, there's a few cons. The pros, let's say, if you are good at following a metronome, right? If you're good at paying attention to the metronome and keeping time with it and not getting distracted, then that will allow you to have perfect tempo. But, there's a big but, it doesn't necessarily mean the whole band is going to keep a perfect tempo. The reason is, tempo isn't something that's kept by the drummer. Tempo is kept and created by the entire band, all the time. Now, I remember a few years ago, I went to see the Rock in Rio concert, and it was in Madrid. And I went to see Metallica amongst a few other bands. Now, obviously, it was awesome. But one of the things I noticed by watching them live, well, a couple different things. First thing I noticed was most of the songs were played faster than you would hear on the albums. Now, this is true for almost any band. You hear the studio version, and then you hear the live version, and the live one is almost always faster, sometimes very, very faster. But that's okay. It still sounds absolutely amazing. Now, another thing I noticed, and this is really important, at least I found it to be really important, was that the tempo of Metallica, right? It's not fair to say of Lars because it's the whole band. The tempo of Metallica isn't perfect. Pretty much nobody's tempo is perfect. I mean, you can get close, but everybody's going to sway a little. So their tempo, they would play songs and there'd be certain parts of the songs where they'd get excited and there'd be a little increase in tempo. There'd be a little decrease in other moments. So the tempo it wasn't a perfectly straight line. It was kind of, slightly wobbly. Not a huge amount, but it was definitely noticeable, at least to a drummer. And one of the most important things I learned by experiencing that live was that it's okay for the tempo to breathe a little so long as the whole band are on the same page. What I mean by that is if the drummer speeds up a tiny bit, it's absolutely fine if the rest of the band speed up with him. And then when he slows down a little bit to come out of that speed increase, the rest of the band can go back with him. Now, I'm not talking about a huge change in tempo here. I'm not talking about like a really, really noticeable one. I'm just talking about the little tiny, increases or decreases in tempo that we naturally kind of have as drummers. Maybe you're playing a fill and it's a fairly complicated fill and you just kind of get a little bit nervous, maybe a little bit tense, and you speed up just a tiny little bit. That's absolutely fine if the rest of the band go with you. Because at the end of the day, once that fill's over with, you're probably going to come back to the bass tempo you already set, and the rest of the band, again, will come with you. Now, what doesn't sound very good is when one band member changes the tempo ever so slightly, and the rest of the band decide, no, we're staying on this tempo and we're not changing for you. Because then you get kind of this separation in the sound. You get one instrument playing at one tempo and the others start to drift off. And then there's this kind of debate, well, whose tempo is the original tempo? Who's right and who's wrong? Well, it doesn't matter. Because, again, tempo is created by the band. It's not, laid down by the drummer and then that's the law and that's that. It's a creation by all these adaptations and all these compensations that you have for each other. Now, it's not just necessarily the drummer that's going to be, having these small wobbles in tempo. The other musicians can do it too. If you're playing a song and let's say the singer, he starts singing a little bit faster, it's absolutely fine for the rest of the band to compensate just a tiny little bit, just to speed up, just to catch up with him, and then kind of bring it back down again. What you don't want to do is to speed up, and then if the singer keeps speeding up, you keep speeding up, and then the rest of the band, then the singer, then the rest of the band, and then it just accelerates, uncontrollably. You don't want that. But it's absolutely fine to just speed up a tad to kind of almost catch up with whoever's in front. It could be the singer, could be the guitarist doing a solo, could be the bass player, could be the drummer. It's okay to speed up, catch up with them, and then kind of, reel it back in slowly again. So again, tempo is not laid down, it's not created by the drummer, it's not kept by the drummer, it's kept by the whole band at the same time. Now, metronome, that's what this discussion is about, right? So if the drummer is listening to a metronome that only the drummer can hear, now we've got the problem that the drummer can't adapt to any of these wobbles that occur throughout the band. Now, it does mean that if he's good at, or she is good at following a metronome, then they're not going to have those little adjustments. But it also means that if the rest of the band, if they need, adjusting, if they start to speed up or slow down a tiny bit, the drummer is now stuck in a situation where he can't compensate, he can't adapt, he can't speed up or slow down, catch up with the rest of the band. This is going to create that separation I was talking about, where one instrument is going at a certain tempo and the others kind of wobble around it. That is something that can be quite noticeable, and that, in my opinion, is way worse than having a tempo that is slightly wobbly, but everybody's together. Again, I'm not talking about a huge tempo increase or decrease. It's a tiny little adjustment that regular crowds or the regular audience won't notice. Only a musician is going to really notice it. And to be honest, most musicians won't even notice it either, even when they're playing. Now, these tempo changes can occur in all kinds of different ways. They can be down to the mood of the drummer, him or herself, the band as a whole, the crowd, the night, the day. It can change. So you can play a certain song, and one day you'll play it at, let's say, 90 BPM, and then the next day you might play it at 96, 98, 100, but that's fine because that was the mood at the time. Another change that can occur is during the song itself. Now, a friend of mine was involved in some studio production work at some point, and he mentioned to me that he was really surprised that he was listening to this, I think it was like one of these pop tracks or something that was being produced in a studio. He was really surprised that when this track got to the chorus, remember it's a sequenced, computerized track, so there's no live musicians in there apart from the singers and whatnot. So the drums are a drum machine. It's a drum track laid down, so whatever tempo you set on the machine, then that's the perfect tempo it's going to play the whole time. So he was very surprised that when they got to the chorus in this pop song they were producing, they deliberately sped up the tempo like 1, 2 or 3 BPMs, just a very, very subtle increase, and then when they would come out of the chorus, then they would bring it back down, go back into the chorus, speed it up, just a very, very subtle amount, just to give it that extra kind of feel of excitement when you get to the chorus. Now, this is something that can happen naturally on stage when you're playing in front of an audience. But again, if you have a metronome in your ear that you are completely locked down to, that's not going to be possible. You're not going to be able to bring that feeling of excitement or that change that kind of naturally wants to happen as well. Almost every band you see play live does this kind of thing. They play faster when they play live in general, and sometimes you'll hear them speed up when they get to a chorus. Again, not a huge noticeable thing, but for musicians, for drummers especially, we can definitely tell. And again, if you're completely locked down to a metronome, then this is going to make it very difficult for the band as a whole to create a nice groove, because groove means that everybody's got to be together. Everybody's got to be working together like a well-oiled machine, like, you know, a clockwork system where everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody's cogs turn in accordance to everybody else's, and we're all playing together. Again, if you're locked down to a metronome and you're always playing a perfect tempo, the rest of the band are just going to be in and out, in and out, in and out, but they're not going to be with you. And as good as you are at following that tempo, and as good as the rest of the band are at following your tempo, it still doesn't mean that tempo is going to be perfect and everybody's going to be perfectly together. In my opinion, it's much more beneficial to have the freedom to make those small compensations and adaptations along with the rest of your band, not to mention those small compensations for excitement and for building up the choruses or whatever it is. It's much better to have that freedom than to be locked down to a quote-unquote perfect tempo. Another reason I don't think it's a great idea to have a metronome is it can be very distracting. Right? So if you're playing the drums, you've got either an in-ear monitor or you've got a wedge monitor in front of you. You're listening for that click the whole time. You're really focused on that click and keeping in time with it. If you do that, then your brain, again, is locked down to that sound and to that tempo. Again, this is restricting you and taking away your freedom to be able to think of other things. Now, you could be so focused on this metronome click that you miss, I don't know, a mistake that a band member made. Maybe the singer went to the chorus too soon, but you're focused on this metronome, so you miss that, and they go into the chorus and you don't. For example, many different things can occur that you could be missing, like musical opportunities. Maybe the bass player plays a really nice lick, and if you hear it, you could double up on the bass drum or on the toms and you could make it sound even better. But if you're locked on this metronome, you're focused on it, you're not going to be able to focus on everything else at the same time, and it's going to keep you distracted from the music itself. Another kind of psychological reason that I don't think it's a good idea to use a metronome live is because it kind of gives the drummer the feeling that their job is to listen to this metronome and keep a perfect tempo. But again, the job of a musician is to create music, not to be focused on a specific sound keeping a perfect tempo. Tempo is kept and created by the whole band simultaneously. If the drummer feels like this is my job, it's to listen to this click and to make sure I'm perfectly in time, and then it's up to the rest of the band if they, are able to follow my perfect tempo or not. Well, that kind of gives that separation again. It puts the drum in a position where their job is no longer to keep the tempo, it's just to lay down a perfect tempo for everybody else to follow. But the rest of the band, then, their job is kind of to follow the drummer, but not to create the tempo altogether. When in reality, you should all be together creating this tempo. Again, it's a creation. It's not something you lay down and follow. You have to create the tempo together, and it's okay for it to sway ever so slightly, so long as everybody's together. Okay, so that's my opinion on metronomes live. I don't think you should use them because of those reasons. It locks you down and it completely restricts your freedom, and now there's no chance to make any compensations. There's no chance to actually create the tempo together. You're just laying down this one thing, and it's up to them if they follow you or not. It's kind of anti-teamwork, if that makes any sense. I know it sounds like a good idea. Oh, drummer can listen to a metronome, they'll play perfect tempo, and then the rest of the band will follow them. We'll always be perfectly in time. Well, maybe if you're all really good at listening and following to a tempo, but at what cost? I seriously doubt that the entire band has the ability to keep an absolute perfect tempo by following a sound. Tempo timing is internal. When you think about timing, you don't have to listen to a sound, a click, or a drum kit in order to be able to keep time in your mind. You can just think, you can count to 4, you can count to 16, whatever you want to count to in your mind without listening to anything, and you can keep perfect timing. So that's what it's about. It's about however many people are in your band, all of those people having that internal timing and tempo in their heads. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to count 1, 2, no, you don't have to do that while you're playing. I'm just saying that the tempo itself is an internal thing, and then it's up to the band as a team to try and synchronize that internal tempo all together when we create music. And again, if it sways a little bit, that's absolutely fine, so long as we stay synchronized. If you lock yourself down to a metronome, that synchronicity pretty much disappears. So what can we do instead? Like, should you use a metronome at all? Well, I think a metronome is a really good tool for you to check your tempo. So you should rehearse with a metronome. Not all the time, but you should definitely, when you're learning challenging things, fills, techniques, or beats or songs that you haven't played before, use a metronome, because that will alert you as to when your tempo is swaying. And then if you know when your tempo sways, you can compensate for that later on when you're playing live. If I know that when I get to a certain fill in a certain song, I'm going to speed up because I've tried it next to a metronome, then when I play live, as I'm getting towards that fill, I can say, whoa, okay, keep an eye on this tempo, make sure it stays steady. So how do we keep a steady tempo on stage? Well, a couple of different ways. First of all, pulse that hi-hat. If you've watched the video course 5 Keys to Grooving on Stage, then you know what I'm talking about. It's in the first video. The pulse is super important. The pulse really, really helps. I know it looks like a simple thing, and it is a simple thing. But the point is, it's extremely helpful because it gives you that 2, 3, 4. You always hear that. You always hear the rest of the band. It's almost like laying down a metronome for the rest of the band and for yourself, and it's a metronome that can adapt to the tempo of the situation. It's almost the perfect metronome. So there you have it, guys. That's my opinion and my reasons as to why I don't use a metronome live and why I don't think it's the best idea. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys the next time.